It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them, so thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today's the next step in our journey into the corner office, and I'm actually recording together in a studio. Gosh, our COVID days, are they over, Tim?
They're over.
They're over. I'm with Tim Bessell. We are lifetime friends, go back way, way back, but getting a chance to catch up with him while I'm here in San Diego. For those of you who don't know, Tim loves his job. He combines lifelong surfing experience with expert craftsmanship to create some of the best custom surfboards in the world. Tim Bessell, founder and CEO, right?
Yes,
CEO. Bessell Surfboards.
Yeah.
Welcome into the corner office.
Thank you very much.
So great to see you. You know, we're getting together, just hours before you're getting travel for hours.
Yes. Heading to Australia.
Heading to Australia, first to Fiji, flying with your family and getting together with your Natalie.
Yes.
And we share that in common. We both have Natalies.
Yes, and I think they're about the same age.
They're about the same age. Yeah. And we are both born on the same day.
Yeah.
Which is, pretty amazing. Not too many of us around. So
yeah.
Great to have you here and great to be recording this in your studio. I'm looking behind me, some of the best looking longboards I think I've seen in a long while are up against the wall. This is Tim's home, away from home.
Yes.
He shapes his boards in the back, has a retail out front, owns the building.
I wish.
Well, at least I use the parking lot up front today.
Yes.
So that worked out.
We do have parking lot services.
Access. That's good. All right. So I won't get towed.
You will not get towed.
That's a good thing. Well, Tim, we typically start these podcasts just getting a little bit of the backstory. And I heard a bit of yours when we got together last year.
Yes.
And we met for the first time in probably 30 years. But tell us a little about where how you grew up, your mom and dad, what they did, and what your early family life was like.
Well, I was born in Wichita, Kansas, when in 1957. We moved to La Jolla in 1959, and it was a beautiful, quiet beach town, as you remember.
Oh, yes.
And you could walk down the main street and not see any cars on a Sunday.
Houses sold for between $10,000 to $12,000.
I think my parents' first house was $18,000 on Cabrillo.
Yeah.
And it's a lot different now. And so I grew up in La Jolla, and
we met at La Jolla High.
At Muirlands.
Muirlands, actually. That's right. We were Muirlands together.
So I
used to play handball.
Yeah. Handball.
Right?
Yeah.
You used to play a lot of handball. How did I just remember that?
Because there wasn't much going on back in the day.
It was before you surfed.
Throwing cans in the street and having cars run over them.
Taking pennies up to the Amtrak station in Del Mar. And,
exactly. So I grew up in La Jolla. I started surfing when I was about 9 years old.
Who taught you how to surf?
My sister.
Yeah.
She was older. She got into surfing first when she was 13. And
somebody else got her involved.
Yeah. She had a friend, Jim Young. Do you remember the Young brothers?
Family. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jim got her into surfing, and then my brother.
Did she learn at Windansea?
No, La Jolla Shores.
La Jolla Shores. Yeah, that's a better place. Yeah. And is that where she taught you too?
Well, then my brother and I picked up it straight away because, we grew up at the beach and would look over back at the hill of La Jolla Shores, and there was no houses up there. And so I just fell in love with surfboards from the first time I saw it. I was really influenced by those.
Now, it's interesting you said surfboards, not surfing. So it was the board and was the art of it. Is that something that grasped your attention?
I think, yeah. My earliest memories was a family up the street. We grew up on West Maryland's Drive,
Right.
which is a few
yeah.
blocks from here. And the two boys surfed, and they had these beautiful boards, and they were shiny, and
were they longboards at that time?
Oh yeah, they were probably 10 foot long,
10-foot long
multiple
boards.
stringers,
Yeah.
glass on
Oh my
fin,
gosh.
and I just couldn't
Beauties.
understand. That was when plastic was brand new. It was
Right.
post World War II,
Right.
and so I just fell in love with surfboards. I just couldn't understand how they made them, and then
You fell in love with surfboards about the same time people that love music and play music fall in love with music.
yeah.
It's in like that 11 to 15-year-old age time. Big influence on your life.
I shaped my first surfboard when I was 13.
13.
My brother and our two best friends, Keith and Craig Lipscomb, they stripped down an old Velzy longboard and gave me the blank on my 13th birthday.
Oh, cool is that?
And my grandfather was an aerospace engineer for Boeing. And he taught me how to work with wood, with metal, with plastics, because he was just a genius.
And this is at, what, 13, 15?
Yeah. And so every summer we would go back to my grandparents' house in Wichita, Kansas.
Yeah.
And he was the chief designer for Boeing at that time.
Yeah,
and
plant there.
Yeah. So I had a great
trainer,
mentor. Yeah. And I loved David Duffy. He was just, we got along like peas in a pod.
So you fell in love with boards, then fell in love with surfing.
Yeah. I mean, well.
And you fit a little school in between. Let's talk
my parents would never. No, my parents would never let me.
Now your parents. Now we have to take a little segue.
Yeah.
Now mom was a
artist.
PhD. No.
My father was a
PhD. Yeah. Mom was an artist.
Yes.
Dad was a doctor of
psychology.
And he was at university.
He later on taught at UCSD, but he had his practice down here.
Oh, he had his private practice.
Yeah, at two different buildings.
And what kind of art did mother make?
She was primarily a painter, but she was a graphic designer.
Yeah.
And that's how she made her living.
Yeah.
And she would do all these beautiful renderings of women's dresses and hats and shoes. And
she made a living of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And then when she got married to my father, they met when he was doing an internship at
East meets West.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it was back at that time in the early 50s, the great expansion of America. My father was from the East Coast. My mom was from the Midwest. And then they came to La Jolla. Yeah. And, there was a group of families from Wichita that actually came here at the same time.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And,
relatives and family.
Yeah. So I grew up with art and science in a very liberal household.
But you made the grades.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I was diagnosed with dyslexia. My mother was dyslexic, but I had a mild case. Right. So it wasn't full blown. But I had problems reading.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Penner from UCSD started a private school across the street behind Rigoberto's.
Yeah.
Four houses back there. It was called the La Jolla School.
La Jolla School.
Dr. Penner, Dr. Salt, Dr. Monk, my father, they were all teaching this experimental school.
Sweet, cool.
Yeah, small classes.
Yeah.
All hands-on.
Kind of Montessori-ish.
Very, but it was a miniature university. It was the same format. Wow. Everybody would go to lectures. The whole school would go to these lectures. Huh. And
I never knew this existed.
Yeah, it was amazing. So it happened for 2.5 years. So I went to La Jolla Elementary School until 3rd grade, and I went there.
Well, then we must have been there.
Yeah, we were absolutely. Yeah. And and then I went to this experimental school, which was fantastic. We used to do math in the sand at Windansea Beach. For exercise, we'd run up and down.
And this was supplementary. You still went to school, right? Or did you do that?
No.
It was full time.
It was 8 to 2 or something.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. But 2.5 years there, I had
totally different mindset.
And my skills in reading and writing were way behind. So as David Andrews said, my umbilical cord isn't that long to leave La Jolla. There was another school about 4 doors up. This is all from my shop on Westbourne Street called Evans School.
Oh, yeah, I remember Evans School.
Evans School
yeah.
was suit and tie.
That's right.
McGuffey reader.
Yeah.
And
East Coast kids came in.
Yeah, and it was completely different. And I fought it so much because I thought they were a bunch of geeks. But then 2.5 years later at this basically prep school, I got through college with a 3.2 without really doing any work. So it was pretty amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, leaving Evans School and going to Muralins was like vacation. And so that was my educational history. Yeah. My father was a child development specialist, and he wrote books. Yeah. And he was actually the first one to develop what they call emotional intelligence.
Right. Yeah.
But he called it emotional maturity. And
better description.
Well, yeah. Well, he was the father of emotional maturity. Right. He could measure it, and he could diagnose it, and he could prescribe.
Yeah.
So that was my father, and my mother was an artist. So I grew up with both of those mindsets. And it
influences.
And they were just wonderful people. I couldn't ask for better parents.
So bringing it back to the business.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of business listeners. You know, when did you start selling boards and kind of said to yourself, oh, this could be a business. I could surf, I could make boards, I could have money, and
okay,
it kind of works.
Great question, because my parents being supportive, they let me use their garage. And,
shaped in there.
And I shaped and glassed and ruined my parents' garage. So
it's got fiberglass poisoning, right?
With the first surfboard I made, I kept it, but there was a kid down the street who made one that was really bad. So we stripped that one off, and I reshaped it and reglassed it and then painted it, and I sold it for $75. So it was on my second surfboard. I knew I could make money.
Do this.
And in high school and college, I was making more money than anybody, but I didn't realize it was going to plateau at almost poverty.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. No.
So I started my own business basically because my friends would buy boards and they were cheaper and not as good. But when I was 15 and a half, I got my first job in North County at Sunset Surfboards.
Right, Sunset. Famous.
Because the sander, Kenny Mann, had broken his arm skating. And that was the shop that we hung out with. And Eddie knew that I made boards, and he'd seen them. And he asked me if I could come in and be a sander until Kenny came back. And that lasted about 6 months. And then I had great factory experience of sanding surfboards, which is very critical. So I probably did thousands of boards sanded. And then this is a funny story. Eddie asked, Kenny came back. And Eddie goes, hey, do you want a job? We love working with you. And I go, yeah, sure. What do you got? He's going, do you want to do sales? And I go, yeah, sure. Why not? I fucking hated sales. Sitting in that showroom.
God, and carrying all types of pissy people.
Trying to sell other people's work. Man, it just wasn't working for me.
Oh, no.
Then luckily...
It's important to find out what you don't want to do when you're young.
Yeah, important lesson. Buzzy Blodgett, the kneeboard shaper, quit, and Eddie knew that I could shape these boards, and
you stepped in.
I go,
it's funny. This happens a lot in the music business. This is how guys like Dave Grohl got their, chance because someone didn't show up. For the interview, or the guy got sick, or he broke his hand, he couldn't play, and the number 2 guy steps in, and they're like, holy shit.
My dad always used to say, showing up is 80% of the job.
That's right.
No, it just was good timing.
Good timing, yeah.
And because I was still making my own boards on the side. So I became a production shaper for Sunset Surfboards.
You were on their payroll.
Yeah, so I could do both. And that's how I built my brand. Because I was a production shaper for Sunset Surfboards. And then at 18, I was just totally enamored with the North Shore of Oahu, and all I wanted to do was surf the North Shore. And I had friends there that actually were working for Lightning Bolt Surfboards.
Okay.
Which was
another big brand. Was that Jerry Lopez's?
Jerry Lopez.
That's right. I remember.
Jack
He used to surf Windansea a lot.
Yeah.
I used to go down there and watch him. There was another guy who was a blind guy that used to surf. They used to surf together a lot. Jerry Lopez and
was it? Later. It could have been. Oh, Mike Henson. Yeah, well, it could have been Mike Henson. Yeah. So
that's awesome. So two great brands.
Yeah. Well, brands. Lightning Bolt was the number one surf brand.
Jerry was the number one surfer
in the world for
15
decades.
years.
Yeah,
decades.
20 years. Yeah. Which opened up a lot of doors. And then I came back to California and worked at Lightning Bolt here for about 4 years. And then I had a falling out with the licensor.
Uh-huh.
And
when we're going to get into licensing later, audience, stick around. There's a very interesting licensing twist to this story.
So when I was 18, going into licensing, I licensed Hang 10 surfboards, which was a total nightmare because
they were very popular.
Yeah,
Shorts brand.
Exactly.
They actually made skateboards.
They did, and they
I remember
made a little bit of surfboards.
A little bit of surfboards.
It took basically 3 years for me to get paid on those surfboards, so that taught me a very important lesson about licensing.
And we'll get to that lesson later, listeners.
So I worked at Lightning Bolt, and then I left Lightning Bolt to go to work for Billy Castor. Billy Castor, in my opinion, and a lot of other shapers and surfers around the world, said that he made the best surfboards in the world. So I was going.
And you would agree with that?
I would totally agree with that.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So
and did he shape for Sunset? And
no, he had his own. He had his own label
from the beginning.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he started Olympic Surfboards.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then the Castor brand. And so I'm working my way through colleges, being a production shaper for Lightning Bolt Surfboards, for Sunset Surfboards, and now Billy Castor, who is just like the most wonderful human being in the world. I got like a big bonus going in there. I made more money than anybody in the industry because he paid his workers really well because he wanted the best.
Yeah, he wanted the best.
He wanted the best.
God bless him.
And
important lesson, listeners.
Yeah, and so
you want the best, pay for it.
Exactly, and because it's just
you'll always get the best that way.
Yeah. Interesting side note. Billy paid his workers probably more than he got paid. And we worked together successfully for about 5 years. I shaped all his production boards and he glassed all my boards.
Right.
So I was making the best surfboards in the world with Billy, who I absolutely loved and admired and respected. And unfortunately, he passed away of cancer.
Oh.
And
at what age?
He was about 40.
40.
He was young.
So young.
45 maybe. And then I started my own brand. Yeah. I left college with about.
And where'd you go to school?
San Diego State University.
So what local?
Yeah. And I
got a business degree, or what did you?
Well, I dropped out with about 5 credits left to go because it wasn't important to me. And I knew that I didn't need a degree, and I went to university to get an education and not a degree. So I am
the education and it was time to leave.
Exactly. And you know, it was 1 unit lab for psychology. I think there was a 5-hour 1 unit history lab, and there was like
the fact that you remember the specifics of that is
scary. and I was pissed off because I had to take PE, but I was surfing every day, and I go,
they wouldn't count that.
Yeah, and I go another semester to get a degree, and my parents didn't care because they knew, because I had already been making surfboards for 10 years.
Exactly,
I was already at the top of.
You already had your business.
I was already up and going, and but my father wanted me and my brother to take over his practice, so he was a little bitter. Yeah. But I remember one day he walked into the shop.
Yeah.
And he goes, because his office was across the street at the medical building.
Right.
And he just shows up one day. He goes, Tim, you know, I'm really proud of you.
Oh.
I was really upset that you didn't want to take over my practice, but the HMOs have destroyed my business and you made the right decision.
Oh, God bless.
So, yeah, that was wonderful. And we got through that little deal.
Fantastic. Great healing.
So
all right. So now we know. Back to the business. Fast forward a little bit. Now,
Yeah.
I remember part of the story we talked about last year was your business got to a point where you were selling boards for $500 to $1,000, right? But putting a lot of time and effort into it because you were delivering high quality goods.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a make or break business. You ate what you hunt, right? You didn't
Absolutely.
shape the boards.
Yeah.
You couldn't pay the bills. You didn't have investment property. Hand them out. And then all of a sudden, ding, 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 someone puts into your idea about the licensing.
There was a long road.
A long road to get there.
A long road to get there. And I'll just briefly go through it. So after Billy died, I started my own business with my own label, and I quit being a production shaper for other companies, which is a big stepping stone.
Sure.
And then we became one of the leading producers of surfboards, producing like 120 boards a week out of this facility.
I wish we had a video listener. You could see this place. He's got, the branded logo, seen all over, some wonderful, beautiful shots. Looks like a little bit of Windansea.
Well, this was before computerized milling machines. So all the surfboards were hand shaped. I had 5 shapers that worked here. We had about 4 rooms. This was a shaping room at one point.
Really?
Yeah, there was 4 back to back.
Facility.
Yeah, so it was just a factory.
Just a factory.
And then the Gulf War hit.
Oh, wow.
And surfboards were like $350 at that time back in the 80s, which was, pretty expensive. And then the Gulf War hit. And I remember we were doing this trade show, and there was more exhibitors than buyers.
Wow.
And my wife and I were selling hats and tees to go along with the surfboards. And we get to this trade show. Nobody's there, but they're going, hey, you got to start a clothing line.
Huh.
And we go, oh, fuck. Okay.
Does it really get
so
bad?
So we took our last $1,500 and commissioned one of the designers of Gordon and Smith, Mike Campbell, to put together a tight 10-piece line. We went to the next trade show, which we had prepaid for before. So we had the sample line, we had the booth, and the Japanese came in and bought like $100,000. We'd never even done that with surfboards. You know what I mean?
Whoa.
So my trajectory was still going forward, even in the Great Recession.
Right.
And we grew that business to $5 million in about 2.5 years.
Nice.
And we got to a point where we needed to raise funds. And being the CEO and CFO, long story short is it was a failed plan. Because these investors came in and asked to have the entire investment instead of distributing it to other qualified investors, like a group of 10 or 20.
Right.
So I got voted down, and long story short is they bankrupted my company, and I almost lost my house. I lost my marriage.
Wow.
And business is serious. And so it took many years. I had to go back to production shaping for other companies. But that's when I had another building over on the corner, the old Natural.
Now, did they take down Bessell?
That was their plan. Right. And they did. And I have lots of stories about the rag trade. And it's not fun. No. I'm glad I'm not in it. But I learned a lot.
Yeah, learned a lot.
I've got a PhD in garmentoism.
You're thinking about Dad's practice every now and then. What that might have been like.
And things were different back then because there was really no offshore manufacturing.
Right.
Only a few of the big guys were doing it.
Yeah.
So everything was made domestically, and sampling was really expensive, and you got to make 4 seasons ahead, and you got to finance those. So I folded that company, but I've always had Bessell Surfboards.
Yeah.
And
so you never lost that. That did not go out.
I've never lost Bessell Surfboards. No.
It's always, that's your name.
Nobody wants it. So I rebuilt the company, and then from the clothing days, my protege, Ben Blank, stuck with me. Okay. And then for a few years...
He was one of your shapers?
No, he was a designer.
A designer.
Yeah, and he was my production manager, and he did everything, graphic design. He was a very smart, bright, talented human being.
Yeah.
and we're still friends to this day. He calls me up about 11 years ago and says, Tim, there's this website called Fab. And I'm looking at it, and they're selling really beautiful designer stuff. And it's when the internet first started happening.
Right.
So I'm looking, and I'm going, we're not going to be able to sell any surfboards on this thing. But I saw Andy Warhol skateboards.
Ah, that's right.
And my son-in-law, Danny Wallace, a famous skater, I call him up and go, Danny, what's the story with these Andy Warhol skateboards? Oh, they're friends of mine. Alien Workshop. Here's their phone number. Give them a call. I gave him a call.
And they were the licensor.
They were the licensee.
Yeah. Right.
The Andy Warhol Foundation is a licensor.
Right.
And I call them up, and they basically hung the phone up on me. They dissed me so bad. So I got pissed off, and I just Googled Andy Warhol Foundation. I saw a phone number, and I called it, and this really sweet lady, Samo.
All right, now before we tell the story, we have to rewind.
Okay.
Because back in the 60s, Andy came out here and made a movie.
Yep.
And it was about La Jolla. It was about surf relationships. It was a little raunchy.
Yeah.
You can find it on YouTube.
Yep.
But you were tied to that, right?
Yeah.
And actually had met him and had a couple of encounters all the time he was alive. So bring us back to that first point of contact.
In 1968, Andy Warhol had 2 locations where he was staying. There was a house down at Little Point. Yeah, in La Jolla. Right down the street at Little Point. And
he kept another boyfriend at another place.
Several maybe. But he used to have the house across the street from Carl Ekstrom's shop.
Right.
That little red roost house.
Yep.
So he had an entourage. I was 10 or 11 years old when he showed up. And my mom, being an artist, she would show me him around town, and he shorts up to his waist and white hair and leather jacket and boots and
white legs.
And he was just a real character. And my mom, being an artist, and pop art coming out when I was very young and impressionable. Connected. So all I wanted to do was be a pop artist. It didn't really, 10 or 11 years old.
Yeah.
And so I knew who Andy Warhol was. In 1984, my good friend John Battanti introduced me to his good friend Gary Binko, who had an apartment in Manhattan. And Gary's brother was the head of PR for the Playboy clubs. And they were opening up a second Playboy club in Midtown. So we got invited.
Playboy clubs. There's a podcast for you.
We got invited.
We'll spin that one off later, listeners.
We got invited to the opening of the Playboy club. And, I'm just like, I don't know, 24 years old or something. And walking in Midtown Manhattan, and there's Hugh Hefner, and there's Barbie Benton. Okay, backstory. Carl, when Warhol was in La Jolla, he bought 2 surfboards from Carl Ekstrom as props for the movie, which was San Diego Surf.
Right. Real raunchy guys. X-rated. Don't let your children see it.
So Andy was friends with Carl Ekstrom. I was talking to Carl a couple weeks before I went to New York, and I said, I'm going to New York. And he goes, if you see Andy, tell him I said hi. So
just like walking down the street.
Yeah. Like, that's not going to freaking happen.
That's never going to happen.
So we show up at the Playboy Club. There's Hugh Hefner. There's all the actors that are popular at that time, and it's a big deal. And we're drinking, and we're smoking, and we're having fun. And lo and behold, there's Andy standing with 3 super beautiful, tall models, and he's just standing there. And my boys go, well, there's Andy. You want to meet him? There he is. And I go, no, I'm not that guy. I'm not going to walk up to him. They go, we dare you.
Of course.
I go, okay, well, if you're going to dare me, I'm going to do it. So I walked up. I had a business card that was handmade. And
like the ones you have now?
No, it had the little man on it with a suitcase.
Right.
And I walk up to Andy. I go, hi, Andy. My name's Tim Bessell. We have a mutual friend, Carl Ekstrom. And that opened all the doors.
He knew right away.
Yeah. And so
Did he remember your mom?
No, he didn't know my mom.
That's not right. Though they didn't meet when he was here.
But she would point him out.
Yeah.
They were different circles, different art circles at that time. Yes. So I hand Andy this card, and he paid a really nice compliment and told him I was a surfboard shaper from La Jolla.
Yeah.
And he said he loved La Jolla. And
a great time here.
And then I got invited to Interview Magazine and The Factory, and it was, and I met Andy the next day. And so I met Andy twice, and he was just a wonderful human being, and he was a genius.
Very artistic.
He was my idol and hero, so
fast forward, we got a recent call, and the licensee of their skateboards has pissed you off, and you're, damn this, I'm going to get to the bottom of it.
Exactly.
You cold call.
I cold called the Warhol Foundation.
And you get connected to the right people.
Yeah.
And they basically say, hey, tell us more.
Well, it's interesting. So Michael Herman, the head of licensing, grew up surfing and skating in New Jersey in the 80s. So he knew who I was.
Right. Oh, right.
So all that hard work. So success to me, what you have to do is you have to do it first.
Right.
Like I made my first surfboard.
First mover.
And then that gave me the experience to go do what I needed to do. Right. You can't rely on other people to get you started. You have to be a self-starter.
Right.
And my mantra is follow your heart, but let your mind lead the way.
So say that again.
Follow your heart, but let your mind lead the way.
Wow.
Like be practical, be smart.
Yeah.
And so Michael Herman and I, over a 6-month period, decided, yes, let's do surfboards. But the San Diego Surf movie was filmed in 1968 in La Jolla, and it got shelved. It got shelved till the release in 2012, which was when so it was serendipitous that I called them at the time that the movie was getting released.
Oh my gosh, that's wild.
And then Michael goes, okay, what is some compelling reason why we should give you this license? And I go, well, I met Andy Warhol.
When I was 8.
Well, when I was like 24. And he lived down the street from me in La Jolla. And he said La Jolla was the most beautiful place he had ever been.
That's right.
So that's the compelling reason.
Yeah.
And I have a connection with Warhol.
Yeah.
And none of those people did.
Right.
Did
they know who Carl Ekstrom was?
I don't think they knew who Carl Ekstrom was because nobody saw the movie until the end. Yeah, right. And you know this surprise ending. So I called him up. And Ben Blank works for Intuit, which is a huge company, and
owns
TurboTax, exactly.
Which is here in San Diego.
And he's always into tests. Let's do a test.
Oh shit!
So I had a 6-month trial period to get the license, to secure the license. We had already done it, but I could bail. So I'm going, how the fuck am I going to sell these things? And what do we even charge? Because surfboards are, $500.
Who knows?
They can't be $500.
And it'd been a grind, right?
Oh yeah. At that point in time, I was rebuilding my company. That was a decade ago. Yeah. And
so you tested the market.
I put down a list. What did the
market tell you?
It told me that people who like surfing and like Andy Warhol will spend $5,000 and up on a surfboard. So basically,
12x.
I added 10. Yeah. And that's all I did. And then on the secondary market, this turquoise Marilyn Monroe went for $8,400.
Oh my God.
Which was $1,400 more than the $7,000 list price. So I go, okay, well that's the benchmark. And
aren't some of these now like collector's items that are worth like $50,000?
Well, we have the Elvis, the triple Elvis, which is $50,000, and
that's per board.
No, that's for a triptych. But I do other work for other artists, and we just did a program with Kenny Scharf. So Andy Warhol had 3 proteges: Basquiat, Keith Haring, and Kenny Scharf. Mm-hmm. Both Haring and Basquiat are gone, but Kenny's still alive. And Kenny's work is selling for millions of dollars now. And we just did 12 boards for Parlay, which is a nonprofit organization. And they all sold for $65,000 and up.
Wow.
So
that's fabulous.
So the
65,000.
Yeah.
For boards that you used to sell for $350 to $500.
Yeah.
Pretty much the same.
Yeah.
A little bit of art, a little more work. Not much.
Well, the construction's the same. It's the art that's the value.
So so the time put into it, and yet that type of return.
Yeah.
So what did it allow you to do? How did you change it? How did it really help
from
you
living
take
hand
your
to mouth, from living hand to mouth. I mean, in the clothing business, we did make a lot of money, but in clothing, you can make lots of money and then lose lots of money because that's just the game.
Yeah.
It's one of the
margins are thin.
One of the most risky businesses in the world. I think it's third next to restaurants and bars. So rebuilding my company and raising 2 kids on my own was quite challenging. And then once I got the Warhol thing, the pressure was taken off.
Yeah.
And
you've been able to manage that. You've been a licensee for how many years now?
10 years.
10 years.
We probably produced over 500 boards that go worldwide. We've had shows at the first board we ever sold was at the San Diego Museum of Contemporary Art at their biannual, and it went on auction within, I think, 2 minutes. It went and sold for $18,000. So
I love it.
And that was an eye-opening experience. Once you get to a point in your life where you don't have to worry about money, that's true wealth. And having too much money is not true wealth.
No, it's not.
And
what's our most important commodity? Our time.
Yeah.
And how we choose to spend it.
And our health.
Yes. A close number 2.
Yes, a close number 2.
If you don't have the time, the health's not important.
Yeah. And 2 years into this pandemic, it really did some good things for me.
Yeah.
I used to be, having this work sin ethic, working really hard. You have to work hard.
Yeah.
But you don't have to work hard forever. You just have to work smart. And listening to Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, if you've never heard of him, check him out.
Yep.
He was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
And the utmost respect for him. He really got us out of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
It's been on the bestsellers list for almost 100 years.
I think the Bible's only sold more.
Yeah. So,
Tim, we're getting close to the end of our time here, but I have a few last questions I want to get, just to kind of bring everybody up to the present. And I want to be very respectful of your time.
Sure.
This gentleman's getting on a plane within 12 hours.
Yes.
For 14 hours.
Longer.
Well, 14 is your first stop.
Yeah.
And then another 6 to get to Australia. Going to see your dear daughter, Natalie, and going surfing with her.
Yes.
Identify, because on Saturday, I leave to go see my dear daughter, and I'm going to surf with her in Costa Rica.
Wonderful.
So we have something in common once again. But very respectful of your time. Just to kind of wrap it all up, one of the things that we really like to always ask our guests is, what kind of career and life advice? And I want to phrase this a little differently for you, because you've had such an interesting trajectory. The combination of arts and sciences, how you found something you loved artistically, and then loved the sport that it was in, and nearly killed yourself and bankrupt yourself, through it, and then resurrected it, on a path now, and best of luck to you. And hope that obviously continues to grow. Well, thank you. But the question is this: to folks that are maybe in that kind of period, we get younger listeners, mostly in their 20s and 30s, but if you were speaking to 15-year-olds at the time, when we were 15, what kind of sage advice and wisdom would you give them about how to think about their future, particularly now? We have a war in Ukraine, we've got massive units moving, haven't moved that much since World War II. Yes. It's where you and I were born. Yeah. Crazy shit going on in this world, in this pandemic. The only advice I can give all of our listeners is, again, follow your heart. Let your mind lead the way. And at times when you don't think that you can go on because of whatever happens to you, depressions, pandemics, business is like the tide. It comes in, you're wealthy. It goes out, You're poor. And when you're down and out, don't lose
faith.
You figure out what your real wealth is when you're poor.
Yeah. And when
it isn't the money in your pocket.
Yeah. And when I had a very successful clothing line, which we did, it was very successful for 7 years. And we were so successful, we went out of business. So,
and that happens a lot to your listeners.
Yeah. So good things are going to happen and bad things are going to happen, but good things can happen after bad things. And my life is so good. I'm blessed with 2 healthy daughters, a new grandson, and a beautiful partner that has made my life complete. And I'm happier now than I've ever been because I appreciate every second of life.
Well, what a way to top it off. Tim Bessell, founder, CEO of Bessell Surfboards International.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
So great to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and have a very, very safe trip.
And you too.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.